stay there. And then we'll have the last segment of our the show, we'll call it a show. And Victor and Andy will join Rich and take some questions. It's about, and well, if you want a glass of wine, get up and get it, right? Step on people's toes, etc. I won't prolong this afterwards. I'll get 1 minute in here about, again, to thank the Harrises and the Spencers. You came, you made a contribution. Your contribution was to the National Review Institute. It's the not-for-profit educational organization founded by Bill Buckley. It is the home, is a journalism think tank, so it's home to many of the National Review's best writers, including Victor, including Andy. So thank you very much. We appreciate it immensely what you've done tonight. If you'd like to learn more about the Institute, maybe you become more involved. And when we say involved, it's just not about, adding another zero on a check. Oh yeah, he's sick. That's a sad case. All right. But we're deeply appreciative of your help here tonight. But seriously, if you'd like to know more, please, Jack Fowler, jfowler@nationalreview.com. If you're ever in New York, ever lost, come see us. We're there. So we have our three panelists, and I did say we're going to trump everything and ask a question, and that had to do with Obama. And I just, it's particularly in the light of, Andy, you wrote about a great piece the other day about the Obama-Hillary email cabal, and Victor, we put out a book by Victor a few years ago just about his Obama columns. I think Victor's been one of the best analysts of Obama, and not that, similar for Rich. So anyway, maybe some reflections on just how bad, evil, and nasty a person Barack Obama is. Is that a satisfactory kind of question?
The best lesson I learned in 20 years of being a prosecutor is that, thank God, there's a Fredo in every case. If there wasn't a guy at the bottom who was undermining all of his supervisors and insulated people on the top by blurting out everything that they're doing and being out front, we probably almost never make the kind of big cases we make. And as a result of that, one of the ways we think about making cases is that everything goes from the bottom up, because that's where you're most likely to get the evidence, right? The problem with looking at Obama, and in particular with looking at the way the FBI and the Justice Department investigated the Hillary emails debacle, is that we're trained to look bottom up because that's where the proof is, right? So the guys who are most out front are the FBI guys, and Comey in particular. He's the one who seems to be making all the decisions. They're the ones who are out doing the rubber meets the road investigation. In the meantime, behind the scenes, the Justice Department, who's not seen at all, are the ones giving immunity to everyone who gets anywhere near implicating themselves in the case, whereas in the Trump investigation, right, if you lie to the FBI, you get prosecuted as a felony. In the Hillary emails investigation, you basically got thanked by the court and sent on your way, unless you give them information that would implicate somebody in the chain. And then even higher, you had the political people who were really making the decisions in the case, and without whom everything that happened wouldn't have happened. And I really think that what happened in the Hillary case is not that the FBI tanked the investigation. To me, Obama said in April of 2016 he did not want Hillary Clinton charged. And everything else is details after that. Everything else we see with respect to all of the frenetic activity in the investigation, including, Comey's big press conference on July 5th, all flows from Obama's determination that she shouldn't be charged, even to the point that when Comey got up in July to rationalize not charging her in the face of daunting evidence, he used precisely the rationale that Obama had stated in his television appearance back in, I guess it was April. And the other important factor here is now, I think that Obama would have done this in any event because Hillary was the only game in town in terms of who was going to pick up and run with his legacy. So I think he would have been supportive of Hillary no matter what. I think he decided that Hillary, not Bernie, should be the candidate. But I also think that he really had no choice whether to make that decision, even allowing that it was probably the right decision from his perspective. And that is because we know that on about 20 occasions, Obama and Hillary exchanged emails over Hillary's private, non-secure account. Now, I want to be clear because some people have gotten a couple of important details wrong about this. Obama was using a pseudonym, but he was not using a private email account. So he had a government account, but it didn't say like Barack Obama at, White House Executive Office.gov or whatever those say. He had a different name than his own, but it was a government account. However, he knew that Hillary was not on a government account. And they buried those conversations. And what they basically did when this came out is they said there was this cockamamie presidential records privilege that he was going to seal it under, not because there was anything wrong with the conversations, just to defend the important principle that the president has to have confidentiality when he talks to his most close advisors. But the fact of the matter is, those conversations have to be chock-a-block with classified information, given the nature of communications between the President and the Secretary of State and Obama's own executive order describing what kind of information is presumptively classified. And I'll leave you with this. When General Petraeus was prosecuted by the Justice Department for mishandling classified information, the Justice Department had to describe a crime on the day that he pled guilty. And what they said was among the reasons why his journals, which were the fulcrum of that case, among the reasons they were classified is because they contained notes of his conversations with the President of the United States. So everybody knows that if you're a certain national security position and you're having communications with the President and you're either emailing or you're making notes about them, those are presumptively classified. And I think that you could never, ever have prosecuted Hillary, this is just the way discovery in criminal cases works, without disclosing all of the conversations and without demonstrating that Obama, even though it was in small compass, engaged in the same behavior or misbehavior in principle that Hillary did. You couldn't have done the Hillary case, you couldn't have prosecuted her without that coming out. So I don't think there was ever a prayer that she was going to be indicted.
I just had two observations, but before I'll make them very quickly. Carol called my wife and I on election day and said, "Would you come over and watch not the returns, but watch Donald Trump win?" So we can, and about the pumps, I asked Devin Nunes, so did Trump ever talk to you about the pumps? Because he didn't know anything about them. And Devin explained to him, and later he said to me, Trump was describing them, he said, "They're tremendous pumps. I love my pumps." That's pretty funny. And I think we all owe Devin Nunes, because if you look at the 6 or 7 investigatory committees in the House and Senate, they've all come up. They've been pretty unimpressive. And the House Intelligence Committee has been the one, the driver. And if Trump has any chance in the midterm to keep the House and Senate, and I think which is why that he does, it will be the tax cut and these disclosures. So he's really playing a pivotal role. My only two observations are that I ask myself, and you do too, why would Loretta Lynch be so stupid to meet on the tarmac with Bill Clinton? Or why would McCabe get $450,000 to his wife's campaign 3 months later, not recuse himself in the email investigation? Why would Strzok and Lisa Page, somebody did the math of the 50,000 text, something like 4 now, or 5. But why would they do it on different phones? Well, yeah, why would they, yeah.
300 a day, what else?
300 a day, why would they?
What
I don't know. Why would they do it on government phones, and why would Andy McCabe would allow people to come in his office? Why would Bruce Orr, right after the election, meet with the Fusion? Except for him, I mean, it was all inexplicable, except, you gotta remember that that's the wrong question to ask. Because Hillary, when they were doing most of this before the election, was 10 to 12 points ahead in all the polls. We think that they were taking great risk. They weren't. It was a sure thing. They did everything a bureaucratic mind would do. They made all the right guesses to advance their careers. They just made it on course. And had she been elected, McCabe and Lynch would have been the Attorney General. McCabe would have got a promotion. Lisa Page and Strzok, we would have never known any of these texts, and they would have run to Hillary and say, we were texting, bragging on how you were going to win. And everybody who's done something wrong would be using it to say I did something right. And Hillary's emails, it would be all on the table. And then conversely, if Hillary had been 20 points behind Trump, they wouldn't have done it. They only did it because they knew she was going to win, and they thought they would be rewarded for that behavior. And then when she lost, it was uncovered. It was never intended for us to know anything. I think that's really important to keep in mind. And then the final observation is we're so obsessed with Hillary's emails and Hillary paying for the Fusion GPS dossier. But we've got to remember that she wasn't Secretary of State, she was the candidate with a Fusion. Secretary of State was, she did it while Secretary of State was a little bit in the past. But she was a candidate, she was a dirty campaigning candidate, but she, in 2016, did not have control of FISA, the request of the FISA. She did not have control of the Attorney General meeting on the tarmac. She was not in charge of any of the DOJ decisions. Most of the culpability, if you think about it, go right back to Barack Obama, because he was in office until January 2017, and 75% of these scandals involve government officials doing things they shouldn't have been doing when Hillary, except for the emails and the communications with Obama, doing things that they shouldn't have been doing while Hillary was a candidate and Barack Obama was directly or indirectly authorizing Mr. President of the United States. I think that's really important, because if this plays out to its logical trajectory, the person who should bear the greatest exposure is the president, even more so than a candidate like Hillary.
I'd just like to hit on two separate issues that just go to hypocrisy. We're seeing a lot of discussion about the importance of the rule of law in this country, as we should, is always appropriate. But Donald Trump has done nothing to violate the rule of law and the Constitution the way Obama routinely did. After Obama lost Congress in 2010, it became a routine practice for him to, in effect, legislate on his own. You'd see repeatedly. They wanted to get their immigration bill through Congress. It didn't go through. He just writes it himself. They want net neutrality from Congress. They don't get it. The agency writes it. They want their regulation of global warming gases, allegedly. Well, then they don't get it through Congress. They write it in their so-called Clean Power Plan. And all of Trump's executive actions, and there have been a lot of them, have all been in the four corners of the law and repealing things that the other guy did that were blatantly unconstitutional, that did not create one peep of objection in the media or on the left. And the other issue is Russia, where I think Putin is a thug. I have no problem saying it. I wish Trump would say it. But if you look objectively, Trump's policy of drill, baby, drill, building up our defenses, having more missile defenses, providing lethal weapons to the Ukrainians, is much more anti-Russia and anti-Putin than anything Obama ever did. who gave us the reset, who gave us the whispered conversation with Medvedev about Vladimir needs to give him more flexibility, who handed Syria to the Russians, and even when the Russians were attacking our democracy, Obama whiffed on that. Because for 50 years, the Democrats have been consistent on being appeasers of and weak on Russia. And it's only now, as a way to attack Trump, that suddenly they're like the Cold War warriors of old, seeing a Russian under every bed.
It was by executive order, Andy, that they expanded what you could do in terms of unmasking, correct?
Yes.
Has Trump revoked that executive order, or is that still in place?
So far as we know, it's still in place.
Does anybody know whether they intend to, or are they going to leave, if that's unconstitutional, are they going to leave it in place, or are they going to reverse that?
It's probably not unconstitutional because all it relates to is how widely disseminated within the intelligence community this classified information is. So we're not talking about information where they're capturing American identities and then putting it out in public, although I think here there's good reason to suspect that they intentionally did it in a way that was likely to be leaked. But just in the four corners of the executive order, the only thing that happens is it broadens the number of people in the 17 or so agency intelligence community that have access to raw intelligence collection and refined intelligence reporting.
So the Trump administration remains committed to that part of the executive order?
I-
Or you just don't know?
I don't know how much of a controversy it's been. I do know one of the rationales that Obama gave for doing this, which I think was just a fig leaf, but he did say that, and this was true, that the intelligence community had been pushing this since the Bush 43 administration, that they had wanted this accommodation to be made, and that was the reason he gave for doing it. I think under the totality of the circumstances, it looks to me, and maybe this is just cynicism, but I think it's well more cynicism. It looks to me like it was part of a scheme, the goal of which was to push classified information out that was unflattering to the Trump people through leaks.
I would be interested to, as all of you have sort of laid out the argument of all of these terrible transgressions that have happened under the Obama administration, and as things are, the onion's getting peeled back. To what degree of confidence do you have that there's actually going to be any sort of righting of the ship? Will people actually be held accountable, and what would that look like?
We may all have different views on this. I mean, McCabe retired early today. We don't know if that's a one-off or if it's part of the beginning of what accountability will look like. There's going to be an Inspector General investigation that I think is going to be a serious one that looks at the way the FBI handled the Hillary investigation. If Nunes's committee succeeds in pushing out this report, we may have much more of an idea about what happened with respect to the surveillance, and if people who were high-ranking in the Justice Department and the FBI authorized that, and it turns out they're still in those positions, and it looks like there's misconduct, it will be untenable for them to say. That doesn't mean anyone will be prosecuted, but I always think with these things, with national security especially, it's much more important to take the power away from the people who are wielding it than it is whether anyone in the end gets indicted and goes to jail. And in fact, I think sometimes the criminal investigation, the demand that people be indicted and prosecuted, slows up what ought to be the more imperative thing, which is if you have people who are abusing power, you need to take the power away and then worry down the road about whether they get indicted or not.
I'm a little bit more cynical. I think in academia, politics, journalism, you take out an insurance policy by being a leftist. And that means that you get 5 or 6 strikes against you because the media's on your side. And we saw Lois Lerner, she had to take a retirement, big deal. I don't think that Loretta Lynch is going to face any culpability. I doubt Eric Holder, you know, the AP and James Rosen surveillance, he didn't pay anything for that. Fast and Furious, nada. Obama jailed a filmmaker on the false scapegoating that he was responsible. There was nothing about that. I don't think nobody will say anything about these communications on sanctions server. And 2 things, just to finish. In the bureaucratic mind, losing your career a little ahead of where you think you should have been, like McCabe or Lois Lerner, is considered a catastrophe for them. And they feel they've suffered on the cross by that. And then they lament. As far as Petraeus goes, that's a very interesting thing, and that was a little bit different. And why was it different? Petraeus was a conservative. You remember, we're forgetting that in 2011, he was polling higher than any Republican, and is higher than Obama as a possible presidential candidate. When he was co-opted, or he made a Faustian bargain to go into the Obama administration, so that he communicated with this paramour of his. Apparently, in August, it was known to Eric Holder's Justice Department, through the CIA, the FBI, etc., and they let him speak. And then he gave a very mysterious testimony to the Congress where, after Benghazi, he sort of said, well, I think it was a spontaneous riot. And everybody was shocked. And I talked to a lot of people in the military. They said, we had a rumor that Petraeus said you could set up a GPS mortar in 4 minutes, which was the Obama narrative. That it was a spontaneous riot, not a preconceived terrorist attack. Nobody could believe why he'd do it. So remember that they had known that about Petraeus disclosing to his girlfriend some classified documents in August, September, October, November, December, January. And then till November, and he's fired 4 days after the election. 4 days after the election, suddenly they call him in and say, you know what, now that we're thinking about it for 4 months, you're fired. And it's not inconceivable that they kind of had a card over his head and were saying, we want you to lend your military prestige to further the narrative that this was a spontaneous riot and Susan Rice was right about all of this. And he did in certain ways, if you can interpret that. And then when Obama was reelected and didn't want a scandal during the election, that their CIA director had broken protocol and they had known about it and done nothing about it. Then suddenly, Brennan wanted the job, they called him in and said, you're through. And then they indicted him. And had he been a liberal Democrat and he had been part of the team, I think he would have ended up like Lois Lerner or Eric Holder. So I'm pretty cynical. I don't think any of the people in the Obama administration are going to be held to account at all.
Peter Strzok?
What's that?
Peter Strzok?
Well, he's a little bit different because he's lower level, but he's going to just say, people, you know, when they're in love, they are indiscreet, and they talk all sorts of stuff and boast about their connections, and that was just all braggadocio during a paramour's affair, and he'll probably get off. I don't know what the crime that he committed, other than indiscretion. But I don't think any of them are going to be held to account. And that's, except, I think the unmasking is a little bit, if they unmask names and leaked it, there's going to be some investigation. I just don't think Susan Rice is the kind of person who's ever held to account.
We have one final question. That's from John Harris, and he promises it won't be the same level as Carol's questions.
Did you ever get the answer? I did not.
I was wondering, what do you think about the chances of the U.S. surviving now against a massive attack related to patriotism and American values versus it was back in the Pearl Harbor days?
I think it depends on the attack. If it was of a 9/11 magnitude, where they took out Capitol or something. I think people would unite still. But we're going down a pathway of identity politics and a red state, blue state, and this nullification of the states now. In California's premium that we're starting to, people wrote about 20 years ago, we're starting to disunite. But I think we're not quite there. So if we had a major attack rather than an optional war, we unite, even behind Trump. And I'm pretty cynical about human nature, John. I think most people, for all their ideological posturing, they want to be with a winner. Remember, they hated Bush, and Bush at that contested election. Everybody said he was selected, he was not elected. And then after 9/11, his approval rating got up to 94%. When he got down there with that megaphone on Ground Zero and said the whole world was going to be hearing from him with his arm around the fireman, he was 94% approval. So I think they would unite if the existential danger was such that, and then they thought Trump was going to win. If we got attacked in a major war and Trump was very successful, defeated the enemy, the Nation magazine would have Trump on its cover. I mean, I'm not cynical.
I don't know about that. I would say that patriotic feeling that Victor correctly notes that Bush evoked on top of that crushed fire truck, I think that's still there, but it's becoming attenuated. And the idea that it's controversial that extremely high-paid and privileged athletes should stand the hell up during the national anthem is a sign of that attenuation and a very bad thing for our country. Before we stop, we have one
last place.
I'm sorry. Unless he's brilliant covert, where is Jeff Sessions? Why isn't he not getting involved inside that?
I think his recusal was overbroad, and then I think he overinterpreted it. I don't think he was ready, unfortunately, for the accusations that he faced after it emerged. You know, if you remember the sequence of events, Al Franken confronts him in the Senate testimony while the story about the Steele dossier is being broken. And I think, to be fair to Sessions, while he was accused of giving false testimony when he said, I didn't have any contact with Russians, if you look at the context of the questioning, I think he fairly understood himself to be being asked if he was implicated in this activity in the Steele dossier that Franken was discussing. And I don't think he meant to say that, you know, he never, in his capacity as a senator, talked to Russians. Nevertheless, I think he was so spooked in a way by being accused of committing perjury and doing corrupt things, and I think he was outraged at that. And part of what he did was throw up his hands and say, I'm out. So I'm recusing myself from Russia. Nobody really knows what that means because the Russia investigation is so amorphous. And he's been skittish about reasserting himself with respect to anything that might tangentially be connected to Russia. And he's really marginalized himself.
Before we go, there's one person who hasn't yet been appropriately thanked, and that is a man with the accent of a Bronx precinct cop and the heart of an angel, Jack Fell.
You should see my liver. We thank again the Harrises. We thank the Spencers. We thank everybody. And then on a practical note, Victor has to find his way to the back table to sign books, so don't mob him like you would. And the wine glasses.
Yeah, be sure to get the books that we got. The wine glasses, get lots of wine. Sorry?